East side, B side, what side are you on?
Well, hello, Adam.
Hello, Brooke.
How's it going?
It is good. It's getting into fall full time, and that just means that there are so many fun activities and things going on. I've got two teenagers in high school, so you know how that is. You got to chase them around. So I feel like I've been going nonstop for like 2 weeks since school started, and it's really fun. But it kind of hit me today where I was like, man, I'm tired.
I came to the realization today that I am just a few days shy of my 1 year here in Lincoln. I was actually talking to my boss, like my big boss, and she's like, "Oh, your anniversary is coming up." And I was like, "Oh yeah, it's like a couple weeks." And she's like, "It's Saturday." And I was like, "Oh, you're right. It is, isn't it?"
My bad. Yeah. I love I've been in my place for 2 years now, and I always forget, but the building will send me an email just like happy anniversary. And I'm like, oh, I can't even remember anniversary with the building now. This I'm like so stereotypically male. I'm just this anniversary thing. I'm just going to forget it.
Just put it in your phone. Just put it in your phone. Let your phone.
Right. Yeah. Heck, I wouldn't remember half the people's birthdays that I remember if it wasn't for Facebook. So I literally, the number one thing that I use Facebook for right now is remembering birthdays.
You just log in, look at the birthdays, log out.
Yeah, pretty much. That you know, like I'll post some stuff, but you know, I used to, 5 years ago, I was on it like, because I was doing it for work, but I would be on Facebook all day long. Now it's like I don't even have the app. The app is on my phone, but it's not on my. I got to scroll all the way over and find it because it's not on. How you can like delete the little icon.
Right.
God, I sound old. When your phone, when you press the buttons, you can make one of them go away, but it doesn't really.
They do the little jiggly dance, and then
they do the jiggly dance. Sometimes when I press too hard, then everything's jiggling, and I'm like, am I having a seizure? No, it's my phone wants to rearrange itself. But yeah, I don't use it nearly much. So it's basically just birthdays. And even that, I've started to slack on it. I feel bad because I look back and like I'll log in and it'll be like, oh, 2 days ago was this person's birthday. You didn't say happy birthday. And I'm like, well, now it's too late.
So I started this show last night.
Yes.
And it's called The Patient. And it really, it feels like an Apple TV show, but it's on Hulu. It's got Steve Carell. And
oh yeah. I've seen like commercials.
Yeah, it is really good. Like the premise, and this is not a spoiler because it is the premise of the show. Steve Carell is a therapist who gets kidnapped by a serial killer.
Yeah, so it's like what happened if like in treatment meant misery.
Yes, and so it's Domhnall Gleeson. So, okay, the IMDb description: a psychotherapist who recently lost his wife finds himself held prisoner by a serial killer with an unusual request to curb his homicidal urges. So that's the description. I mean, and that really doesn't even come close to like telling you what happens in the show because and the other interesting thing is for a drama, each episode's only 22 minutes.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder if that's a trend that we'll see more because people are like, my kids will talk, and I even have younger friends who are like can't just sit through a movie anymore, because your attention spans have changed so much, and TikTok's so popular. And it's like, I wonder if things will just get more bite-sized because what was that service that came out right when COVID hit?
Quibi.
Quibi. And yep. I think that I love the idea because there were
Quibi
or something like that. I just think like there were so many other things going on, but that it didn't work. But I mean, like a 22-minute drama like that to me, like I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to add another thing to my list because I love Steve Carell and Domhnall Gleeson is great. It's the idea that one of the Weasleys from Harry Potter is a serial killer is a little disturbing.
Was he?
Yeah, he was Bill Weasley.
Oh, see, I never really watched Harry Potter, but I've seen him. He was in Black Mirror, an episode of Black Mirror that was intense. It was so wild. And I've seen him in a couple other things, and he's really good. And he is playing an American in this, which is pretty funny.
Oh, and he was also General Hux in Star Wars.
Oh.
Yeah, which I totally forgot, because that character started out like such a big deal in the first one, and then by the end it was like, well, no, we're done with that.
Oh.
I got rid of it real quick, but yeah, that's that. So you've liked it so far?
So far, I have really liked it. Yeah.
How many episodes in are you?
I'm 3 episodes in and 4 are out. I just started. I started the 4th one, but I didn't finish it.
Well, only being 22 minutes, I think that, like, now I'm more interested in giving it a shot.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. So, The Revenant. Damal was in The Revenant as well.
Because his dad is Brendan Gleeson, who's been around forever and been in a ton of stuff.
I'll have to look him up because I'm not quite sure who he is.
He was Mad Eye Moody.
That sounds very familiar.
The Harry Potter movies. He's been in, like, there's a great movie that I should probably do an entire episode on called In Bruges, with him and Colin Farrell as assassins but they're like on vacation basically in Bruges. It's really well done, but he's done a lot of like really more intense, stuff.
Yeah,
but he's got one of those faces like
I recognize him. Yeah,
it was like you immediately see him like, oh, that guy.
Yeah. But absolutely give it a shot when you get a chance, because I've been very impressed with it. And Steve Carell, like, even though you always think of him in The Office and being so goofy, he is a very good serious actor.
Yeah, I felt like when he left The Office, he was going to have more of a, like, that was going to be his dramatic turn.
Mm-hmm.
Like we would start, kind of what Robin Williams did and Jim Carrey did for a little bit, and where you were a comedic actor, but then you got into more serious stuff later on, because there was that what was the wrestling movie? It was nominated. We get there. The Foxcatcher, and then that had Channing Tatum and Mark Ruffalo, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was in The Big Short, which is such a good movie. But yeah, I wonder, like, but he went back to doing like silly stuff like Space Force.
Yeah. So this one, this is a and then he was also, wasn't he on the morning show?
Yeah.
Which I have not seen that one, but I feel like that one was a combo goofy, serious,
Yeah, more like a dramedy.
Yeah.
I haven't watched either. I've been told it's really good. I was never a morning show person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't grow up watching like the Today Show or Good Morning America. I knew they were always around, but it was just never something that I was really that interested in. And it feels like I know it's still kind of a big deal, but it feels like the idea of the morning show is kind of, for like TV, is definitely lost the luster it used to have.
Yeah. But that's all I've done this week.
I've been, continuing my, series rewatch of Bones. I've watched all of the new Lord of the Rings, and I'm getting into those. That is one, though, because the episodes can be so long, it's not bite size.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that is a stumbling block, and I have absolutely no interest in the Game of Thrones thing. So I haven't watched that at all, but other people have said it's pretty good. But yeah, the She-Hulk, still watching, still kind of meh. I mean, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I haven't been able to get through Thor: Love and Thunder because it's out on streaming now.
I haven't watched it either.
And I've started it like 2 times, and I'm just not into it. I don't know if it kind of feels like the Eternals, where these are characters that I was super into with Thor Ragnarok and the Infinity War series and Guardians of the Galaxy, but like it feels like they just decided, okay, well, we don't want to continue this him hanging out with the Guardians of the Galaxy thing because they got their own movie coming up. So we'll just do a real awkward, like they're leaving sort of thing at the beginning. And so all that chemistry is gone. And then the great chemistry that they had in Ragnarok with Valkyrie and him just doesn't seem to be there. Like Valkyrie and Jane Foster, played by Natalie Portman, seem to have, to be having more fun. It's been very uneven. So I'm a little disappointed that I haven't been more excited about it, but
yeah,
I don't know if it's just fatigue at this point with the MCU, because there's just been so much stuff.
So much.
That, you wonder, like, there is such a thing as, like when you've been eating sour gummy worms for a while, and then you get that kind of like almost sugary coating on your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, these gummy worms are still good, but I've got sugar mouth and dry mouth. And I'm just like, I don't think I could eat any more gummy worms. I kind of feel like that's where I'm at with the MCU right now.
I get that. Because I haven't even watched, and this isn't even part of the MCU, I haven't even watched Lightyear.
Yeah, that was another one where I'm like, all right, that's fun that you're doing that. I guess I never really needed to know the story that the toy was based off of.
I never thought about it. And the thing is, it's Chris Evans, and that's my husband, but I still haven't watched it because I'm just like, I'm kind of at the same level. Like, it's a toy. I never thought about the backstory.
Yeah, like it doesn't seem all that important, but I think we are in an era where we are so spoiled for choices that it becomes almost too much. I mean, the Emmys were this week. Did you watch those at all?
My mom watched them, and my partner at work watched them, so I feel like I watched them.
Yeah, I mean, I've read some stuff, but then I'm reading like the nomination list, and it used to be, for the Oscars, a lot of those movies I wouldn't have seen because they weren't in the theaters for very long, or they were more, art pieces that were in specific smaller theaters. They weren't the blockbusters. But I'm watching, I'm looking at the list of all the nominees for the Emmys, and I'm like, I watch a lot of TV, like an embarrassing amount of TV.
Mm-hmm.
I have 3 TVs that are usually on at all times, and I haven't seen like 60% of the shows that are on this list. And I'm like, how is that even possible? It's just, there's just so much stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm still watching like, Knight Rider and Murder, She Wrote from like 40 years ago. So that probably factors in as well.
I had something I was gonna tell you and I forgot.
That's okay.
Well, it'll come back to me.
You'll think about it about 4 a.m. and text me.
Yeah, I will. You'll be up and you'll respond. So it's fine.
Yeah. Like, what is sleep?
Yeah, I can't think of what it is. Anyway, so this week we didn't that's what I was gonna do. I meant to update you. Okay, so last week we didn't have an episode because literally and my daughter knows I'm going to talk about this, but literally as we were starting to record, I get a phone call from my daughter who was moving, and in the process of moving, she had borrowed my dad's truck and lost the key fob. Mm-hmm. Literally like drove off with the key fob on top of the truck. And
which is crazy to think about because that's not something that could ever happen before. You couldn't drive the car off without the keys.
Right. So when we were talking about that last week, Adam very graciously said, look, you've got this story about you're not going to be able to concentrate with her going through this because she's trying to Uber here to find the key, and she's getting a ride with people she didn't even know. And, she's got to travel, an hour distance here, an hour distance there. And so Adam, you were wonderful because you're like, I know you're not going to be able to focus. So I've got this great story. I'll tell it, boom, bam, and we'll jump back in next week. So that's what happened. But there's even more to it because Adam, I didn't even get to tell you the rest of it. So she moves all her stuff into my dad's house because she's moving as a nurse. She's moving to a new assignment. Mm-hmm. So she gave up her apartment, and that's what was happening last week when she lost my dad's key fob for his truck. When she moved into his house, everything got situated with that. Well, then she had to get to her new place in her new where her new assignment is. So she had rented this place sight unseen. She gets there and it's, well, first of all, it's not what was pictured. Of course, pictures picture's live.
Yeah, the wide angle lens.
Whatever.
Yeah. I mean, you throw a filter on there. I mean, we've all been in dating sites. Nobody looks like they look.
Right. So she gets there. It's not exactly what she pictured. She was like, that's fine. I can, it was a little dingier than she was expecting. She's like, that's fine. I can clean it. But the problem was it was filled with bugs.
Oh,
Many, 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 many bugs.
Like we talking ants, we're talking flies.
No.
Ooh, worse bugs.
Yeah. So it is in a wooded area. So there was apparently water bugs, but there was more than just water bugs everywhere.
Oh, goodness. Not great.
So
have they been able to get out of the lease at least?
Yes. So they were able to get out of the lease. They had to stay in a hotel, like in an extended stay. And they're working with their agency to get a new place. So
goodness, this has been the move from Hades here.
Yeah. So that is why we did not record last week, and that's the update for you.
I just love that I, wasn't sure if we wanted to share the story, or so I pretended it was a friend of mine, and then after we put that out, I got like 3 different messages from people being like, "Who did that happen to? Is everything okay?" Was it someone I know? It's like, okay, sorry. So I'm putting my friends and family into hysterics thinking that I didn't tell them something.
Sorry, Adam's friends and family. It was actually my daughter. Yeah.
Life happens, and then you adjust. And the best part is, like, I had my whole A side ready to go last week, and then so this week I didn't have to do it. So it was like, it's like when the teacher's like, "Hey, we're going to postpone the test for a week."
See, look, you're already set. You're already ready.
Yeah. Win-win.
But anyway, so if you are all set, I think you should go for it.
Absolutely. So I mentioned last week that I had a life experience that influenced my decision for what I was going to talk about on the A side. And it was one of these sort of could be embarrassing, could be kind of depressing. Do I really want to talk about this, on a public media? But at the same point, it's like, it's a good story. Mm-hmm. So I, as you clearly I've mentioned before, am single and on the dating sites and looking to find a partner down the road. And I had matched with this person on Hinge, which is one of many of the sites. And we had a great conversation, and we actually, got to the point of, hey, do you want to meet up? And we both looked at our schedules, and this is the hardest thing when you are, an older person, is, an adult that has stuff going on. It's like, oh, the next time that we both have a window is a week away. So we set a time and a place, and then we chatted for a few more days. And then on Wednesday, they just disappeared from the app. And we hadn't exchanged numbers or anything. And that, people decide they get tired with the process. They delete the app. Mm-hmm. It happens. Mm-hmm. But I was like, but we set this time in place. So what if they were like, hey, I've got a date set already. I'm just going to, I'm going to get off the train for a little bit, and then I'll go to the date. So I was debating from Wednesday all the way to Sunday if I was going to go show up at the.
What day did you text me?
What was that, like Saturday? I think?
Saturday? Yeah, I think it was Saturday. Yeah.
Because we were supposed to meet 5 p.m. on Sunday at this lovely little like dive bar restaurant, but the food there is amazing. The owner used to be a like 5-star chef somewhere and got burnt out, and now just makes really great like bar food. They have a mushroom melt, so it's got Swiss cheese and caramelized onions and mushrooms. And you can get a beef patty, and it's on marble rye, and it is just delicious. So I was like, worst case scenario, and Brooke even said, worst case scenario, it's a place you like, you're going to get a sandwich, you're going to have a good time. Mm-hmm. I was like, all right, because if I don't go, my little romantic comedy brain,
it'll bug you.
It'll bug me, and I'll always wonder what if. And I had this like horrible vision of them like walking into the bar and looking around and realize like I'm not there and feeling like I stood them up, and I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go, because if they do show up, this is a great first date story. we could be telling this story at parties down the line, or how did you guys meet? So I was like, okay, this is worth taking the risk. And so long story short, got there early. And if you've worked in the service industry ever, like, people who are waiting for a date, they just have a look about them. Right away. And so, like, I sit down, I get a drink, and they're like, do you want some food? And I was just like, I might be meeting somebody, but I don't know if they're gonna, so I'm gonna wait a little bit on the food. And they never showed. Totally understandable, not a big deal. I still had an awesome sandwich, which I very much enjoyed. But then the worst part for the server is they got to come back and go, well, are you, like, they don't want to be like, hey, did you get stood up? Are you gonna order now?
Right.
So I was like, hey, I got stood up, I'm gonna order it now, just to kind of get it out of the way. But as I was sitting there, I was like, why was I so convinced that I couldn't miss out on this potential, like, romantic comedy moment? And I was thinking about all of the romantic comedy movies that I've watched throughout my life, and was like, what about this scenario, what made me want to not miss this potential chance that was probably a complete waste of time, except I got a good burger. And I was like, okay, but what is my favorite romantic comedy, and what are the romantic comedies that have impacted me the most? And I was like, I expected, I was thinking about it as always, I've Sleepless in Seattle's fine, When Harry Met Sally, okay. I was like, what were the movies that hit me the most at the age where I was really starting to understand, that dating and was different than fairy tales. And of course, like nearly everything that impacted, Adam 20 and under, I realized that the two romantic comedies that I have seen the most in my life have one thing in common. They both star Michael J. Fox, which shouldn't be a surprise because I've had the same haircut for 41 years because I wanted to be Marty McFly from Back to the Future. And then, of course, when I'm thinking about movies that are now 30 years old, because one came out in 1991, one came out in 1993, you cannot find them anywhere for free. They
what
are not
is with
on...
you picking all these movies you can't find anywhere?
Because now it's like a thing. Like, we should just rename the A-side to movies you can't watch, but Adam wants to talk about.
That is what it is now.
That's what it's become. So the two movies that impacted me the most were there was about a 6-year period where Michael J. Fox had left, Family Ties. Family Ties ends in 1989, and then he doesn't go back to television until 1996. So that was really the only period of his life where he was a pure movie actor, no TV. He had Back to the Future and things in the 80s while he was on Family Ties, but he didn't jump into the big move from TV guy to movie guy until the early 90s. And one of the first movies that he was in as just a movie person was 1991's Doc Hollywood, which is the story of a doctor who is moving to LA to become a plastic surgeon, and his car breaks down in a small town, and he finds love and just reevaluates his life and what his priorities are and what means a lot to him. And if that synopsis sounds remotely familiar, it's because they basically ripped the entire movie off for Pixar's Cars. So, which I didn't even realize, and put two and two together until I was reading some reviews of Doc Hollywood. And big city guy gets stuck in a small town, finds love, and reevaluates his life. And that's the entire plot line of Cars, just with talking cars instead. It was interesting to see him play a role where Marty McFly was always the good guy. I mean, yeah, he was a scoundrel at time, a rascal. He got in trouble. He didn't want to go to class, but he was always a likable character. And even on Family Ties, Alex P. Keaton, would be very conservative, but he was always a likable guy. And here, Doc Hollywood is a movie where it starts out where this guy is pretty much a jerk. Like he's self-absorbed. He's moving to LA to get rich on, doing breast implants and not being like a real doctor anymore. And it was weird to see Michael J. Fox in that type of role. The movie, of course, also stars Julie Warner, Woody Harrelson, Bridget Fonda, and you're looking at the cast. You're like, how are all these people? Excuse me. This is quite the cast, but for 1991, not Woody Harrelson wasn't a huge star yet. Bridget Fonda was still kind of making her way as well. So Dr. Benjamin Stone, on his way to Beverly Hills, car breaks down, gets into a love triangle, and then finally gets his car fixed and leaves town, only to realize that what he truly wants is to go back to the small town and become the doctor there. The town has just lost their doctor, so when they find out that the doctor was driving through and his car broke down, they go into small town shenanigans to make sure that he might stay and become the doctor, which is perfect timing.
You all right? Need some water?
I cannot breathe. Okay, there we go. A lot of fun. As a young boy, it was a movie that I first started to kind of get, the idea of love and dating. And it was one of those where, again, not everybody immediately, and I feel like we're going to go in a little bit into therapy here, but in both of my favorite romantic comedies, the two people that fall in love spend about 2/3 of the movie not liking each other.
Right.
Which probably explains a lot of Adam's dating and remote romance history. So Doc Hollywood came out in 1991. It had a budget of only $20 million. It more than doubled, almost tripled that budget, and was considered a pretty solid hit for this new burgeoning movie career that wasn't Back to the Future. However, the critics didn't love it. The tomato meter, the thermometer, has a score of only 68. So, it's above 50%, which is pretty good, but definitely not the blockbuster success that it probably could have been, both critically and financially. But the movie that definitely is most responsible for my view of dating and love and romantic comedies is another Michael J. Fox film that came out 2 years later, in 1993, and it is most commonly known as For Love or Money. In some countries, it was released as The Concierge, which is the role that Michael J. Fox's character plays. But it starred Michael J. Fox, Gabrielle Anwar, who probably the only reason that I started watching Burn Notice in the early 2000s or the mid 2000s was because of Gabrielle Anwar was on there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I hardly see her in anything. And I was super excited. So Michael J. Fox plays Doug Ireland, which is an alias that I have used in the past.
Have you seriously?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So he's a concierge and he works at this giant New York City hotel. And he can get you anything. If you need, tickets to go see Cats, or you want to go to a Yankees game, or you want to, find the best price on a watch, like he's the guy you come to with this big hotel. And to me, it seemed like the coolest job on earth, because there was nothing that Doug Ireland couldn't do or get you. I mean, at one point, he's got to get from Manhattan out to the Hamptons and beat a bus there that's already left. The bus is halfway there. So he calls a guy who calls a guy who calls a guy and gets a helicopter ride from Manhattan to the beach out in the Hamptons, which is a pretty baller move. The entire movie is set up around his ability to kind of get whatever you need. And there's a great line that has stuck with me for a long time, is that at one point, Gabrielle Anwar, her character's name is Andy, says to him, he's like, I can get you anything, whatever you need, I can get for you. And she's like, yeah, you really can get everything you for other people, but you can't get what you want the most. And that's what the entire movie is about. Doug Ireland has saved all his money and wants to build his own hotel. He has 1 month left on a contract that he has for a dilapidated hotel on Roosevelt Island. And he's got to find the funding to build this hotel. But the only person that can give him that funding is a rich sort of, you know, stock character British billionaire who's come in and is, you know, buying companies and turning them into big hits. And he's, you know, found this designer, which is played actually by Israk Marahi, the designer himself, in a fun little cameo. He's quite good at it. And he turned him into a huge success. And he is the only one that Doug thinks can fund this dream hotel. But the girl that he has had a crush on for years, who works at the perfume counter down this, you know, at a department store down the street, is this guy's mistress. Mm-hmm. And so Doug has to go through trying to do all these favors for the rich guy so he can get his hotel. But a lot of those favors are, you know, taking care of Andy, or, you know, getting her to a restaurant, or making sure that she doesn't find out that he's really not leaving his wife. So the entire thing is set up where they basically bicker for like the first 2/3 of the movie, mm-hmm. and don't actually seem to like each other until about 20 minutes left of the movie. I mean, it's one of those, you know, like Sam and Diane Cheers thing where there's tension. So you always, you know, like it feels like there's something there, but they, you know, they're, me thinks they doth protest too much, sort of thing.
Right.
And it's a lot of fun. One of the best little, you know, cameo parts. You've got Bob Balaban, who's another one of those guys from that thing that you would immediately recognize, playing a IRS investigator who was coming after Doug because he hasn't been declaring all of his tips, which that hits a little close to home for anybody in the service industry, although we don't get nearly as much cash as we used to. But the idea that the IRS could just show up one day and be like, hey, why do you got all this money in your bank account? I mean, right. I know people that still, and they've worked in the service industry for years, they don't deposit all of their cash. They keep it, you know, literally under a mattress, mm-hmm. because they, you know, are worried that at some point, you know, the IRS is going to come for them. It's very unlikely they've got bigger fish to fry. But he is great as sort of this, he's the small little guy with glasses. He looks like an Irish, but he's very intimidating the entire time. And Fivish Finkel, who was on Picket Fences for years, plays the, you know, bellhop at the hotel who's been there since like the 1920s. And he is barely in the movie, but he's got some great moments. Dan Hedaya plays a guy he's a Italian guy who owns a garbage company, who may have just been the influence for Tony Soprano. He does a great job. And of course, the only thing that really makes the movie is the fact that Michael J. Fox and Gabrielle Anwar, to me, have amazing chemistry. I've read a lot of reviews where people didn't think they had chemistry, and I'm like, what movie are you watching? Mm-hmm. Then again, I was watching this when I was 12, so maybe it was a little bit, you know, my understanding of chemistry as a 12-year-old was probably a little bit different from an adult. The movie is known as basically a flop, whereas Doc Hollywood was a budget of $20 million. It grossed almost $60 million, was considered a hit, had a, you know, 68% tomato meter reading. For love of money, this is, again, a movie that only Adam loves. The tomato meter is 37%. The audience score is 45. Of the, you know, the movie was made for $30 million, and it bought in the box office total was 11. So it is a absolutely qualified bomb. It only got 2 out of 4 stars from Ebert. Siskel gave it 2.5. It was considered one of the, you know, sort of a bomb. And I just watched it again today. I found it on Amazon, mm-hmm. and you couldn't buy it directly. If you wanted to buy just that movie, it was $25. But if you wanted to buy it with arguably one of the worst Michael J. Fox movies, but another one that I absolutely love, The Hardaway with James Woods, where he plays,
I don't think I know that one.
So he plays an actor who teams up with a cop to learn about the streets, because he's trying to go. Oh,
James Woods, the cop. He's like the hard and grizzled cop. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So they actually they kind of remade it with Hollywood Homicide a few years ago with Harrison Ford and Josh Hartnett. Mm-hmm. It's very weird that one of the first movies that he did after he left Family Ties and the Back to the Future series is about a actor who's a nice guy, who's trying to break out of his nice guy image and get into more action movies. And he basically just plays that role in his first movie. Very, very meta. But for that, you could get both movies for $12. So you betcha I did. And I watched For Love or Money again yesterday and today, 2 days in a row. Absolutely love it. I don't understand why it wasn't a bigger hit. I think it is a lot of fun. And I have thought of myself, when I've talked about every job that I have interviewed for in my life, I always go back to wanting to be a concierge, whether that is doing sales, whether it is working in marketing, whether it is, working in a restaurant. Is I want to be able to get you what you need and be your concierge of the moment. And I have gone back to that, time and time again. So not only did this movie influence my love for romantic comedies, it probably indirectly impact some of my dating history. It also gave me the best interview answer that I've ever gotten in my life. And every time I give that answer, that I want to be the concierge and kind of talk about what that means, I get great responses. So I owe a lot to For Love or Money. And I highly recommend, if you've never seen it, you can go find it. It is not free anywhere, but both Doc Hollywood and For Love or Money are available to stream for the requisite $2.99 on a bunch of different services. Or if you're like me and you're just like, okay, evidently I spent the last 10 years getting rid of DVDs. Now I'm going to spend the next 10 rebuying those DVDs. It is available on Amazon as well.
All right. So go check it out. I remember Doc Hollywood more. I remember For the Love of Money, but I remember Doc Hollywood way more than I remember.
Yeah, I mean, it was a much bigger hit, and it was, For Love or Money was evidently, was considered a bomb and was not in theaters hardly at all. It was, in theaters for 4 weeks, which back then,
especially back then, that was
like now
bad.
Things tend to go, but 4 weeks,
because back then it was 3 months was the average.
Yeah, I mean that is a really short run, and they didn't give it a lot of love or promotion. So it's not shocking that it's probably not one that everybody remembers, except with fitting, it's one that Adam absolutely loves.
All right, there you go. Is that the A side?
That is the A side.
Well, so I think the last couple of weeks we've kind of been, in the past and overseas, and we are going to bring it back a little more current this week.
So this is one that Adam's probably going to have there might still be around nightmares.
Well, yes and no. We'll get to that because I don't want to spoil it, but
fair. Yeah.
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no.
Okay.
All right. So this week we're going to head over to Michigan and discuss the Babysitter Killer, aka the Oakland County Child Killer. Now here's the thing. We don't know exactly who this is. So I know a lot of times I like to say, okay, this person was born in this day and this year, and this was their childhood and this happened, but we don't know. So here's what we do know. Between February 15th of 1976 and March 16th of 1977, so a little over a full year, 2 boys, 2 girls between the ages of 10 and 12 went missing outside their homes in Oakland County, Michigan. They were either on their way to or on their way from, on their way to the house or on their way away from home. They were leaving their houses.
Right. It's around there.
Each of the children was discovered in a public area in under 20 days of when they went missing. The children were all killed in a manner that was either strangled or shot.
Thanks.
Okay. This was the largest murder investigation in U.S. history at that point.
Wow.
2 of Detroit's daily newspapers, as well as a bunch of radio stations and television stations, covered the case. So this is what we know. are 4 victims, the first of which was Mark Stebbins, 12 years old, of Ferndale. So Mark went to the American Legion Hall on February 15th of 1976. He had left the Legion after telling his mom that he was going home to watch a movie on TV. Well, by 11 p.m., his mom's home already, and he's not. So when he doesn't return home by 11 p.m., his mom gets panicked. She calls the police. She reports him missing. She described him as wearing a red sweatshirt, a blue hooded parka, blue jeans, black rubber boots. His body is found 4 days later. His body is found 4 days later by a businessman who initially thought he was a mannequin.
Oh.
He's wearing the exact same clothes that his mom had described him as seeing him in last. His body's found lying in a pile of wood and dirt in a parking lot next to an office building, hence the businessman finding him. Mark had been strangled, and unfortunately, he'd been abused with a foreign object. He had 2 lacerations near the back of his head, and he had rope marks on both of his wrists and his ankles, which state or show that he'd been tied up. An eyewitness described that he had to have been placed in the lot around 9:30 a.m. because apparently they had, been in that lot before and after, before that time frame. So an eyewitness said that,
he wasn't here when I walked in.
Right. Yeah. So then we have our next victim, 12-year-old Jill Robinson. Jill Robinson was from Royal Oak, and Jill leaves her home on December 22nd of 1976. She'd actually had an argument with her mom over what to have for dinner. Jill picked up her backpack and she left the house. Who hasn't argued with their parents?
I was going to say, we've all been there.
Like everybody.
That's not what I want. Okay,
right.
Well, that's what you're going to get.
You're either going to eat that or nothing, kid, right?
Yeah.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
So the next day, her bicycle is found behind a local hobby store. And then her body is found along Interstate 75 in Troy, Michigan, within view of the Troy Police Department. Her body is found on December 26th. A 12-gauge shotgun had been used on her, and she was disfigured in her face. Her body was fully clothed, and she was wearing the backpack that she had taken with her when she left home after the argument with her mom. An eyewitness saw a blue Pontiac Le Mans parked in the lot around 4:30 a.m., a lead that was never, ever followed up on.
I hate those.
Yeah. Next is 10-year-old Christine Mihalik. She's the youngest victim. She was from Berkeley, Michigan, and she was reported missing on January 2nd of 1972 after she didn't come home when she'd gone to the 7-Eleven store on 12 Mile Road by her house. So a mail carrier, excuse me, let me back up. While she was at the 7-Eleven, she bought a magazine and she left. So when she didn't return by 6 p.m., her mom reported her missing. Her family would go on TV and plead for her safe return. They even offered a $7,000 reward, or if you want to call it a ransom payment, whatever, just to bring her home. So Christine was actually found by a mail carrier 19 days after her disappearance. She was fully clothed, and she was found on the side of the road in what's called Franklin Village. Christine had been smothered to death less than 24 hours earlier. Now, mind you, her body was found 19 days after she went missing, and she'd only been killed 24 hours prior to her body being found.
So she was kept somewhere for almost 3 weeks.
Somewhere, yeah. Yep, her body was laid within view of houses nearby in the snow. She was placed with her hands on her chest, similar to like a funeral pose. Again, 19 days she was missing and had only been deceased for 24 hours. So our last victim is Timothy King. He's 11 years old. So Timothy had been home alone because his older sister, had gone on a date, and his older brothers were off doing, older brother things. And his parents had actually gone out to dinner with one of the father's clients. He was last seen about 8:30 p.m. on his skateboard. So his plan was to go to the store and get some candy and then skateboard around for a little bit. He was seen by 2 eyewitnesses an hour after he left home, so about 7:30. He was seen leaving the store and headed to a parking lot next door to the store, where a man with a long, shaggy haircut approached him. The two of them got into a blue AMC Gremlin. Now, I didn't look, and I should have. I meant to look up the body styles of the Gremlin and the Le Mans to see if they look similar, because both cars were reported as blue.
Oh, there you go.
So it could have been like, oh, it looked like a Gremlin. No, it was a Le Mans. People confuse cars all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, the Gremlin, though, was, if I remember correctly, was a very unique looking vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a weird, like, hatchback.
Right.
Like, yeah, like real unique.
So, I mean, if there was more than one person involved, obviously there could be more than one car. So,
yeah, or they're apart, so it's not all,
Right. It was just something that I was thinking like, oh, I wonder if it was actually like the same car. But
I mean, I'm looking at like pictures of both right now, and there are certainly years of Pontiac Le Mans that have a similar visual style.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like if there was like an older one that was 2 doors, I mean, like from far away, I could see how it would be considered similar.
Okay. So this blue Gremlin had a white racing stripe on it. So his older brother, Christopher, Timothy's older brother, Christopher, hears that, Timothy had left the house and now he's missing. So he walks through his neighborhood that night with a baseball bat, hoping to catch Timothy's kidnapper.
Absolutely get that.
So, of course, Timothy doesn't come home. An extensive search covering the entire Detroit metro area happens. His body is found 6 days later on March 22nd by 2 teenagers in a shallow ditch in Livonia. Timothy had been sexually assaulted, just as Mark had been, with a foreign object. He was suffocated approximately 6 hours before he was found. So he was taken on the 16th and killed on the 22nd. So he, again, was held for days. His clothes had been washed and pressed before his death, and he'd been fed fried chicken. Now, this fact is important because it shows that his killers were actually watching and tracking the news. So in a news report, Timothy's parents begged for his return, and they asked for his abductors to feed him KFC because it was his favorite.
Oh, wow.
Now, these are just 4 confirmed victims of this babysitter killer, aka the Oakland County Killer. There are some other abductions that are suspected to be related to them that happened in Oakland County around the same time, but they're not specifically tied to this murderer. So there's Cynthia Cadeau, who is 16, of Roseville. Cynthia was found bludgeoned to death on January 15th of 1976 in Bloomfield Township. Cynthia had left a friend's house around 8:30 p.m. to go home. Her body was found 5 hours later by a motorist. Cynthia had been stripped of all of her clothing and sexually assaulted. Now, if she is a victim of the babysitter killer, she'd be the first female or the only female to be sexually assaulted. She died from blunt force trauma to her head. A post-mortem exam showed that her body had been dragged over the snow-covered pavement. Her clothing was 15 feet from her body. Jane Allen was between the ages of 13 and 14. It depends on the report that you read. She was found in a river in Miamisburg, Ohio on August 8th of 1976. Again, she is not a confirmed victim. She's just suspected because it happened in the same area.
Similar details.
Right. So she was found 4 days after she had accepted a ride while hitchhiking in Royal Oak, between Royal Oak and Pontiac, Michigan. She died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Due to decomposition, medical examiners couldn't determine if she had been sexually assaulted. There was one victim that was suspected to be connected to the Oakland County Killer, but then it was disproved. Her name is Sheila Schrock. She was 14, and she had been raped and shot while she was babysitting in Birmingham on January 20th of 1976. Her killer, her actual killer, they discovered, his name is Oliver Rhodes. He had actually burglarized several homes in the area earlier that evening. A neighbor saw him while they were out shoveling snow on his roof. So he was sentenced to life in prison. She was initially thought to be a victim, like I said, of the Oakland County child killers. One that is thought to possibly be, but not really connected, but maybe possibly connected. Her name is Kimberly Alice King. She is not related to our other victim, Timothy King. They're not related. They just happen to have the same name. So Kimberly Alice King disappeared from Warren, Michigan on September 16th of 1979. Authorities think she was abducted and that her disappearance could be connected to these unsolved murders of Mark and Timothy and Jill and Christine. She was last seen walking in her neighborhood in Warren. She had snuck out of her friend Annie's window close to about midnight. That's what Annie told police. She was the last person that saw Kimberly. So Kimberly actually used a payphone to call her sister Connie, Konnie. Connie said, "Hey, go back to Annie's." A letter was actually sent to the Roseville Police Department in 1983 that supposedly disclosed the location of her body, but it was never found. Her father was actually close friends with the primary suspects of the Oakland County Killer case, Archibald Sloan and David Norberg. So we're about to get into them. So after Christine's body is discovered, authorities start noticing some similarities in her case and those of Mark Stebbins and Jill Robinson. So the reports were released that tell the public, hey, look, there's possibly a serial killer in this Oakland County area. Please be aware. Please be on the lookout. Michigan State Police led a group of law enforcement officials from 13 different communities. They gathered them up and created a task force that was devoted primarily to this investigation. So after Timothy King disappeared, a woman told authorities, hey, I saw this boy on a skateboard talking to this guy in the parking lot of this pharmacy, and it was the AMC gremlin, like we discussed. So based on this, investigators create a profile, a white male between the ages of 25 and 35, dark complected, shaggy hair, sideburns. They also said that this man must have a job that gives him the freedom to be able to move around, and also something about him makes him appear trustworthy to children. This man also had to be familiar with the area, and he had to have a place where he could keep children captive for long periods of time without raising the suspicions of neighbors. More than 18,000 tips came in that the task force had to investigate. It resulted in about 24 arrests on unrelated charges. And it also led to the discovery of a multi-state child pornography ring that was operating in North Fox Island in Lake Michigan. Unfortunately, it did not lead to solving the case of the Oakland County child killer. After Timothy King's murder, a psychiatrist who had worked with the task force got a letter. This letter had a bunch of errors in it, a bunch of spelling errors, and it was written by an anonymous author claiming to be the slave of David Norberg. Okay. His nickname Frank. So this anonymous author wrote that both he and, quote, Frank had served in Vietnam together, and that, quote, Frank was traumatized because he had killed children, and that Frank had taken revenge on more affluent citizens for sending him and the military to Vietnam. So this anonymous writer expressed fear and also remorse in the letter, saying that he was losing his sanity, and he was endangered, and he was suicidal, and admitted to being an accomplice to Frank in the killing of the young boys. He told the psychiatrist to respond by printing the code words, "Weather Bureau says trees to bloom in 3 weeks," in that Sunday's edition of the Detroit Free Press, before he would provide photographic evidence in exchange for immunity from prosecution.
Right.
The psychiatrist said, "Look, I'll meet you at a bar so we can discuss this." But the anonymous person never showed up, and he was never heard from again. So Archibald Edward Sloan, who was a known child molester who had victimized young boys in his neighborhood, became a person of interest after hair samples were found in his 1966 Pontiac Bonneville. That hair, remember we said blue Pontiac, that hair was a match for hair found on the bodies of Timothy King and Michael Stebbins. But it wasn't Archibald Sloan's hair at all. A witness claimed that they saw Timothy King being abducted by 2 men. One described a man being in their late 20s. Another described a man being a strong resemblance to serial killer John Wayne Gacy, who was actually supposedly in Michigan around the same time.
Oh, wow.
Gacy's DNA did not match the DNA found on the victims' bodies, so he was ruled out. Archibald Sloan was convicted to life in prison in 1985 on charges completely unrelated to the killings. So police in Parma Heights, Ohio, arrested a man named Ted Lamborghini. He was a retired auto worker that was believed to be in the child pornography ring in the 70s. On March 27th of 2007, investigators told the Detroit television station WXYZ that Ted was considered the top suspect in this case. He pled guilty to 15 sex-related counts involving young boys. He did that instead of accepting a plea bargain that would have required him to take a polygraph test in the Oakland County killings. He also rejected the offer of a reduced sentence in exchange for a polygraph in the case. He does not want to take that polygraph.
Yeah, and that's so often in these stories we hear that once somebody gets caught, they just start like volunteering more information. You know,
right.
Like, oh yeah, I also did this, and oh, here's the other 5 things you didn't know about.
Yeah, this dude was like, nope, not me. So in October of 2007, the family of Mark Stebbins filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Ted Lamborghini for $25,000. The lawsuit alleged that Ted, who lived in the metro area of Detroit in the 70s, abducted Mark Stebbins and held him captive in a Royal Oak house for 4 days in February of 1976 before murdering him during a sexual assault. Ted has never formally been linked or charged in the death of Mark Stebbins. The attorney, David Binkley, sought compensation, including funeral costs, for Mark Stebbins' brother, Michael, but stressed that the money was secondary.
The burden of proof being lower in a civil case.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So this case actually sparked new interest when Timothy King's father, Barry, and his brother, Chris, tried to get the state police to release information about a man named Chris Bush. Chris was the son of General Motors executive Harold Lee Bush. Chris Bush had been in police custody, or he was taken into police custody shortly after Timothy King's abduction, because he was suspected in being involved in a child pornography ring. He allegedly committed suicide in November of 1978. But here's the thing. No gunshot residue was found on him. No blood spatter was found. And the entry wound between his eyes.
That seems very, very awkward to do.
And have no splatter?
Yeah.
No splatter? There were also 4 shell casings that were found in Chris Bush's room. He was also found neatly wrapped up in his sheets. Mind you, he killed himself, neatly wrapped himself up, and wiped everything down.
Huh. It's a neat trick if you do it, I guess.
Uh-huh. There were bloodstained ligatures found in his apartment, as well as a hand-drawn image of a boy that closely resembled Mark Stebbins. This boy in this picture was screaming. This picture was found pinned to the wall. There's no confirmed activity by the Oakland. There has been no confirmed activity by the Oakland County child killer hadn't been for nearly 20 months prior to his death. The state police have released 3,400 pages of investigative records pertaining to Barry King. That's the father of Timothy King. Then we have James Vincent Gunnels, who's another suspect. It's been said that he was actually groomed and molested by Chris Bush. In 2009, analysis showed that a hair found on Christine Mihalich's blouse was a mitochondrial match to Vincent Gunnels. At the time of the murders, Gunnels would have only been slightly older than the victims. In 2009, he agreed to a polygraph test, but intentionally threw the test. So he had to take a second test because he was told if he passed, he'd no longer be considered a suspect and he'd be eligible for parole. He did not pass.
Yeah, you don't intentionally throw a polygraph test if you've got nothing to hide.
His response to his failed polygraph test? Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. So now remember, the police released 3,400 pages to Barry King, Timothy King's father. So in these pages, there's some new revelations, including DNA testing of new suspects and the bloodstained ligature and the sketch from Chris's apartment. Catherine Broad, who is Timothy's sister, compiled an archive of investigative material so the case could keep growing. So they're looking through the cases, and they decided to produce a documentary entitled Decades of Deceit, which completely condemns the police department and the prosecutors because they said it was a very shoddy investigation. They said they were uncooperative in communication, and they just said that they disregarded leads and they weren't helpful to the families. So funds from the sale of this documentary were donated to the Tim King Fund. It was designated to help abused children and support activities for children in Birmingham. So now remember, there was hairs found. So there was forensic DNA tests conducted in 2012 that showed that the hair on the seat of Archibald Sloan's car belonged to Mark Stebbins and Timothy King, and they matched some unknown man. The hair DNA, like I said, didn't match Archibald Sloan, but it did indicate that he knew or lent someone his car.
Yeah, there's something connected here.
There was also hair from a white dog that was found on all 4 of the confirmed victims. In 2013, an anonymous informant reported that a blue AMC gremlin was buried in a field on a farm that was being developed in Grand Blanc. So police investigated the gremlin for ties to Timothy King. Remember, it was reported that he was seen getting into that
racing striped blue gremlin.
Right. So in February of 2019, Investigation Discovery aired a 2-part 4-hour documentary about the killings. At the same time, an investigative reporter in Detroit named Heather Cataldo announced a new key suspect, a convicted child sex offender who we know was convicted in, 1985 and convicted to life in prison. He actually, yes, he was convicted in 1985 on charges unrelated to the killings. Well, he failed a polygraph test when he was interviewed by the Oakland County Child Killer Task Force in 2010 and 2012. So we still have all these failed polygraph tests. We have this DNA match to somebody that we can't place. We have these dog hairs, but we still have no confirmed killer. We do have
the guy that maybe killed himself, who probably
right. We have the guy that maybe killed himself,
contract killed. Yeah,
and then we also have Archibald Sloan, who is already serving life in prison. So that's why I was like, well, maybe, maybe.
I'm just glad I wasn't in Michigan in the 70s.
Man,
what was happening?
Shoo. Again, 70s kids walking around, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night.
Definitely a different era, and not every kid was that walked home got kidnapped, but a lot of kids in this story did.
Yeah. So again, our two main suspects, one has killed himself supposedly, but it doesn't really look like that, and the other one is serving life in prison and will never be released. But
the guy whose dad was super rich and influential and probably could have hired somebody to take care of him, but totally did it himself.
Yeah, totally did himself. But there you go. That is the case of the Oakland County child killers.
It kind of reminds me, we talked about the story about Baton Rouge, where it got so convoluted because you had two serial killers running around and messing up. There's so many different, this could have been part of it. It could have been parts. It's almost like, this is a very strange comparison to make, but we talked early on this episode about how there's just so much stuff to watch that you get lost. It almost feels like there were so many incidences of children being attacked in this area at that time that you wonder if wires just got crossed, because they're like, well, we can't figure out if this is separate people, if it's connected, or if it's not connected.
Right. Especially because, you've got the 4 that they say are confirmed, but then you had possibly, and then there was the one that, initially we thought it was, but then it was disproved. So there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, this was not an easy case to manage, but clearly wasn't managed very well.
Yes. So hopefully, since, after the dude Chris Bush was, locked up, and then the killing stopped, and then he killed himself. Hopefully that is the end of that. And it's sad. I feel bad for the parents because they don't have definite closure. But again,
and they've tried a lot of routes. I mean, the civil case, the documentary, sounds like a lot of these parents have pulled out all the stops to try to get some resolution.
Yeah. But it does sound like, maybe for them that is closure. Maybe they do think, hey, it was these two, so if that brings them closure, then that's all you can ask for.
Well, if Marty stops by with a DeLorean, we are not going to go visit 70s Michigan.
Oh my goodness. But there you go. That is the case of the Oakland County child killer.
Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the A-Side, B-Side podcast. We very much appreciate everyone who tunes in, sends us messages, lets us know if we make mistakes or we have stories that you want us to check into, or are concerned about my friend who had a car problem and want to send me messages just to see how that's going. If this is the first time you've stumbled upon us, or if you are looking to hear more episodes, you can go to our website, A-Side-B-Side podcast.square.site. There we have links to all of your favorite streaming services. Apple Podcasts is the most popular one to listen to our show, but we're also on Spotify and Stringer and a bunch of other places. On the website, you can get all of our sources for both the A side and the B side. I try to put always a link to Decider, which is a great website to figure out if you can actually stream something. Lately, anything I mentioned is probably not available to stream for free, but there's always links on there, and Brooke's got all sorts of links to each of the stories that she covers each week. We've got merchandise on the website that you can check out. We should get like a stocking cap for the fall.
Ooh, or a beanie.
Right? Or a beanie, yeah, like some winter gear. We should get some winter gear up there.
Yes, we should.
Brooke does all of our design for the merch, so part of that is she has to drink a lot of coffee to be creative, because that is Popeye is to spinach as Brooke is to coffee. So if you'd like to buy her a coffee, go to buy us a coffee. Is it buy us a coffee?
Buy me a coffee.
Buy me a coffee. It's the singular, not plural. Buymeacoffee.com and type in A-Side, B-Side podcast, and you can send her a coffee that way, and we get more creative juice flowing. Like, we've also got stuff on YouTube. If you prefer to use YouTube to listen, you can go to our channel and listen there. We're also on a Patreon. If you want to, sign up there, we'll get you some extra stuff. And Brooke, is there anything I am forgetting?
No, you nailed it. Good job.
Someday I'm just gonna like have a checklist and make sure I say everything instead of just rambling on, but that sounds like a lot of work.
You got it. Well, that was episode 108. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Brooke.